What's up guys, welcome to Wasted Space, and we're back in Space Engineers, back experimenting again a bit. As some of you might have noticed, I've been building quite a lot of weaponry of late, like player-made weapons. And having last night gone and messed around with a few of these with a friend of mine, just sort of tested them out in actual combat scenarios, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that we need to go back and reassess what we think of how standard weaponry works. So standard ship weaponry, like we've got lined up on these craft over here, so your normal Gatlings and rockets. So I will come back to what exactly those are a bit later on in the video, as that's my sort of new design, or part of the new design for this video. But before that, I thought it'd be interesting just have a quick sort of test through here with this firing range I've set up to see exactly how different types of armour respond to being hit now by standard weapons. So missiles, less so Gatlings. I'll let you in on a little secret, they are straight useless. The only thing I can find that Gatlings are anything good for are on turrets. They're quite good at shooting down missiles. Other than that, they don't do any damage really. So here we've got, a bit like before, but with some more variants, a bunch of armour test panels for us to sort of see exactly how things respond when shot at by a rocket. And what I'm going to do again with a bit of editing is skip through each ship here and just talk a little bit about what exactly is going on and why. So we're in the first ship here with the single rockets, and we're just going to open up onto this light armour in front of us and see how many rockets it takes to go through it, basically. And I would imagine we're going through, there we go. So we've gone through, and that's, what, 6-7 rockets to go through one of those? Not a huge amount, although noticeably about 7 times as much as what it would have taken prior to this volumetric explosion thing being added. So I wonder if that means that some of the other armours are going to behave a bit differently as well. So for this second test, we're shooting at the same thing but with 2 layers thick, so you would expect it to perform very, very similarly to the first test, except last twice as long. Except that's not what happens. So as we continue to blast away at this, that should have taken sort of 12 to 14 rockets, double what it did the first time, and it just doesn't. And I have a theory that what's happening with these twin layer armours is the first layer is actually deforming into the second layer as it's getting hit, and because of that, it's damaging this back layer even though it hasn't been touched yet. So you can see, in fact, there's quite a wide effect on the rear end, even though the rocket impact point was going to be small and was going to be on the front, so you would expect this to be pushed outwards. And it isn't. It's been damaged by this front layer compressing in. So let's skip to the next test. So for test 3, we've moved on to a single layer of heavy armour, as you might expect. So again, we'll go through this and see how many rockets it takes and whether there's any sort of noticeable weirdness with how they behave. Now we can already see that there is an exponential increase in how well this is performing versus the light armour, as you would expect. In fact, if I stop firing for a second, you can see we haven't even broken the tiniest of holes yet. So let's finish firing to get through, but it is obvious that a single layer of heavy armour is now quite a strong defence. And if we go up and have a look, I mean, the hole we've blown through it is also noticeably smaller than any other holes of these. So that means that, well, your next shot would need to hit that same spot for the damage not to be mitigated by the armour again. Now, rather than go through and record each individual one of these tests and then play them back, because that will take quite a while, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through, finish off all the tests and just bring anything that might be interesting back. So we're on test 4 here, and I'm glad I did skip forward because it took 58 rockets to go through 2 layers of heavy armour, which is pretty extreme, but I thought maybe diagonal armour might help out. So let's see what happens on this light armoured diagonal slope and whether it performs any better than the single armour sort of wall we have over there. So in fact, that performed slightly worse. That was 6 shots, and I actually think we had a hole already on the 5th to get through that slope, whereas that first armour we fought against took 7. So putting it into an angle actually seems to concentrate the explosion a little bit, at least on this light armour here. So I've just completed the 2 big heavy armour tests to my left with some very interesting results. Before I get to those, I'm just going to shoot at this, just in case. It was the idea that this is even more sloped than the armour to our left, so maybe that slope helps, maybe it doesn't. So let's just shoot a few times, and yes, as you can see there, just in case you were wondering, slopes don't really help a huge amount. But what I did find that was incredibly interesting and leads me to, obviously this is not a great, this is not a perfect test, there's not all the variables controlled, but these three here performed very, very interestingly. So, if we take the 2-layer heavy armor block, that took 58 rockets to get through, as I mentioned. So, interestingly enough, this 3-layer heavy armor block took 84 rockets to go through, by which I can deduce that it's about 26, 27 rockets to go through one layer of heavy armor, and if you add another layer of heavy armor, that adds another 26 or 27 rockets protection. But this one was really interesting because this one had a layer of light armor in the middle, like in my previous video. And this actually took fewer shots to go through than just 2 layers of heavy armor. By 11 rockets, 47 rockets it took to get through this, which kind of supports my theory that this light armor actually buckles and damages stuff alongside it, unlike the heavy armor, which seems to stand up in a a much more resilient fashion. The only other interesting thing is, while this seems to be terrible with the 1 layer of sloped light, the 1 layer of sloped heavy did 31 rockets. And remember, that's only a single layer thick. So 1 layer there actually performs on a diagonal better than a single layer of heavy. The other interesting thing with the heavy armor is it doesn't scale quite right on the very first one. For some reason, that's easier as soon as you put another layer alongside the heavy armor of more heavy armor, it becomes considerably harder to crack. But then from then on, it doesn't seem to continue to gain exponentially. So it means that you can then add a 3rd layer, and it doesn't really help. But anyway, that's all very interesting, and my conclusion from this are that A, rockets are really not very good anymore, missiles are really not very good anymore as a weapon. They certainly don't do anything like the damage they used to do, and they also kind of ruin light armor much more than heavy armor. So if you're building your ships out of heavy armor, you're quite well defended against sort of current conventional weaponry. So on that note, let's move on to the more experimental stuff I've got here, the more fun stuff. So this is what I've been working on recently, and it is going eventually, once finished, to be the carrier for those missiles up there. So if I go underneath, we can see we've got a bunch of missile bays. But the way I've built this is in segments. So the ship is sort of segmented apart from each other with layers of heavy armor. So if we go inside, you can see that we've got, while the heavy armor is only 1 layer thick, there's an empty sort of space up here with nothing in it, and then another layer of heavy armor. And this was kind of designed to try and protect the internals of the craft, and the bottom floor is the same, obviously. And then if I go down in through here, this is sort of where all the real gubbins is kept. Deep inside, we got a spherical gravity shield ready to be turned on should someone try and use some ore-based weaponry on us. And we have a highly protected fighter sort of commander's cockpit buried deep in here. If I just control this, we also have, in the distance over there, something my friend made last night. As I said, we were playing around and experimenting a little bit with how exactly PvP really functioned when you got down to the nitty-gritty of 2 players trying to fight each other. And he built some quite nasty, quite overpowered little stations. So if I just cut to some footage outside, so yeah, what we have placed over there and another one over in the distance over there are copies of this, although set to hostile obviously, which is a horrible little defensive outpost that my friend made to try and sort of defend against, the idea was to defend against the ore shotgun, basically. This has gravity generators to defend itself, and it was also going to be capable of shooting down a lot of the ore. Now I'll cut to a few screenshots of some of the experiments from last night while we're doing this. What I can say is we did manage to get Space Engineers to run at something like 3 frames a minute by playing around too much with something that sort of violent. But what I plan to do now is show a little demonstration of what happens when you put up something heavily armoured against something that's as heavily armed as one of those is. So I think they have 14 missile turrets on them and 20 Gatling turrets on each one. So we're going to take what is the Big Bertha ship here, and we're going to go and see how it stacks up if we were to just go and approach something like that. Thrusters on. It's not the quickest thing in the world, but it's not that slow given how much it weighs as well. And we're not going to do anything special here. It does have weapons. I'm not going to use them. The intention is not to test that side of things. The intention is to see quite how effective this little defensive unit here, as heavily armoured as it is, will be at taking down something like this. And I've done something really stupid and actually exposed my belly to it, which of course is the bit of the craft that is the weakest. But as you can see, it doesn't really seem to be doing very much about stopping me. If I really wanted to, I have a feeling I could just come straight in here. New volumetric explosions are pretty as well. As you can see, while the ship has been damaged, you would have expected a hell of a lot more, and back before, it would have been a hell of a lot more. And that's in taking into account that, I messed up here. I showed the underbelly of this ship, which was the bit that doesn't have any armour. If I was to have gone past with just the top panel showing, I wonder how that would have ended. So all that led me quite neatly to two questions. Firstly, how do you deal with one of those annoying little defence bases that my friend has built? And I do have a solution for that, which we'll get into a second. But also, evidently, it seems player-created weapons can be more powerful. What else can we do to try and sort of make use of those? And that leads me on to what we have here. So this is not a finished design yet, because it's the first time I've really played around with warheads as a tool in the game. But this is designed to be my cluster missile design, essentially. So on the front here we have a series of decoy pods that will deploy during flight, fly off ahead of the current missile, and distract any turrets that are on board, whatever you're firing at. And then at the back here we have the sort of the cluster approach. So we have 4 pods here. Excuse me, we have 4 pods here that, again, detach a bit like the decoys at the front, although they detach a little bit later. And these are designed to punch a hole in the side of whatever it is that you're firing at, remove the armour barrier from you, and then finally the main warhead will come in. And this is actually quite heavily armoured with a sensor on it, and it's filled up with explosives, and when the sensor detects that it's inside an enemy ship, it triggers all of the warheads to detonate. The setup here, it's not perfect yet. I'm still fiddling around with especially how exactly to launch it from my big ship over there. But we go in here, I'll show you just quickly how it was all put together. So we have the merge blocks in groups, so I know which one they are. We have a group of warheads here. Don't click that button. And then we go down the bottom. We have a bunch of timers. Basically, the activation timer this is designed to be launched from a ship. So the activation timer is hooked up to a sensor which is on the back. And the idea is that once this rocket detects that it's cleared the ship it's in, it will activate its own engines and start off on flight. But until it leaves the ship, it's not in the slightest bit dangerous. So it's kind of deactive and safe right up until the point at which you drop it out and that sensor doesn't detect anything behind it. So the sensor is literally set up to just, when it can't see anything, it will start that activation timer. And if we go down to the activation timer, is pretty straightforward. Activation timer starts the thrust and starts the decoy and the cluster timers. And of course, they, on different delays, launch the decoy and the clusters. And because we're shooting at a target that's quite close, all of these delays are really short. But you'd adjust them depending on how far away it is that you're shooting. And the other thing is, you don't need a timer for the main missile, because of course that's designed to pierce inside and then explode once it gets in, rather than explode on the outside of the ship, potentially not doing much damage. So, having seen what happened with my larger ship attacking something with 14 missile turrets and 20 Gatlings on it, and quite happily flying out the other side, let's see what happens when we launch something like that at that same ship again. So, it's the front of it, and we're just going to go over here, and the way I've got these set up at the moment to trigger is basically I need to pretend that they've just dropped out the bottom of the ship by flying a ship behind them, and then it goes, oh look, that ship's disappeared, now we'll all go and fire. So if I just get into this and get into a sensible zoom location, we can go and see exactly how these work in their current iteration. And as I said, this is an early stage. They're going to improve from here. I haven't used warheads much, but let's just see what happens when a few of them launch off. So there they go, and you can see there the decoys are detached and fly off ahead, and the clusters follow. They impact, opening the craft up, and then the 3 torpedoes find their way in and explode once inside. And to me, that seems pretty effective. If nothing else, the cockpit's out already, inside that strong room chamber buried deep in here. I think there's like 5 layers of heavy armor in the way. So the cockpit was there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So it's got through 5 layers of heavy armor and cracked open the top. Pretty good, I thought. Certainly something that could be developed further, and I do believe starts to lean towards the idea of these sort of weapons being slightly more effective if you can make them hit than the sort of in-game weapons that we currently have. Now I actually have another one of these set up over here because some people basically asked when I did the last couple of videos on the ore shotgun about how effective this would be when you were shooting at something that was actually sort of geared towards defending against this sort of thing, so with turrets and with gravity generators to help sort of fend off the attack. And interestingly enough, this is firing at that rubber dinghy over there, 1,000 meters away, so maximum range, and that has spherical gravity generators on it and is covered in turrets. So it'd be very interesting to see whether or not this cannon is functional when shooting at something that's very, very defensive and very, very geared towards dealing with something like this. And part of the reason it's so high up is because I've already tested this and I know that this happens. It was an interesting thing. I wasn't expecting it, and no one mentioned it in the comments, but of course, once you start firing your ore at something that's got rockets, all the rockets that miss follow down that path and slam into the ship that's firing it. And there you can see that once some damage has been caused to the front of the barrel, further damage gets caused really quickly because, of course, that's all now deformed inside. So when the ore comes out, it's going to catch on all of these edges and cause further damage. So perhaps a slight flaw with the ore shotgun design that I didn't think of, and as far as I know, no one even foresaw either. No, there was a lot of talk about how it wouldn't be as effective as it looked in this scenario, but not much said about the fact that actually it was just going to get shot hardcore by all the rockets firing back. So looks like that's going to be pretty much done firing. Let's get down there and see whether or not any of this ore has actually arrived at the target. As you can see, this thing is very heavily defended. Look at the amount of Gatlings shooting out of there. And I can only come and view this if I spin around it and keep moving fast enough that they can't hit me. I have to say, it doesn't look like a huge amount of that ore has actually made it through. I think there was a little bit of damage on the front. I don't want to stop too much because if one of these rockets hits me, I'll go pinging off into the distance. But as we go past, oh no, it's been hit. Stuff has arrived and damaged it, and stuff is still arriving and damaging it by the looks of things, but nowhere near enough to really disable something that's fully defensive with one of those rock shotguns. So this sort of kind of leads me to the idea that you're going to need a range, or the best way to attack is with a range of player-based weaponry, and you need to sort of coordinate those attacks so that things are distracting other things and it's all working in tandem with each other. So finally, and the last bit I wanted to show was just a solution for those really blimmin' annoying things covered in turrets, which is this. Basically, it's a very, very, very fast ship designed not to shoot at the target, but to shoot the target as it goes past. So these things are really bad at tracking high-speed objects. So as we come in here, we're going to come into a range, and you're going to see that they're just going to miss me. And as I come in, continually being missed, I can do a strafe past and unload a chunk of rockets into the side of them. And then off we go. High speed again. And as long as we keep turning, as long as we keep at high speed, these things are going to miss. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Please remember to hit that like, subscribe button if you enjoyed it, if you found it interesting, and I'd really be interested to hear any of your comments on some of this stuff. You know, how would you go about assaulting a base, and what would you do if you were being assaulted? How would you defend it? I mean, I've got hopefully some PvP videos coming up where we can really go and try out some of this stuff and see what Space Engineers would be like as a full PvP game. So I'd really be interested to hear what you guys have to say, any comments you've got. So cheers, guys. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will catch you next time.